Yesterday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there had been an advancement in these negotiations. That came 2 days after three Palestinian militant groups said a deal for a ceasefire in Gaza and to exchange prisoners was closer than ever. So, how real is all of this? Dan Perry is a former Middle East chief for Associated Press, author of a Substack, Ask Questions Later. What does he think? Could a deal happen?
It could, but I'm not holding my breath. I realize there's been claims from both sides of some progress. And look, the basic situation hasn't changed in over a year. Hamas demands an end to the war and an Israeli pullout in exchange for all of the hostages, which are their only leverage. And Israel won't end the war while leaving Hamas in power, because that would hand them some sort of a victory narrative. So this logically pushes both sides towards a partial deal in which the war is maybe paused, or maybe part of the strip is vacated by the IDF in exchange for some of the hostages.
But if it's just a temporary deal, as you suggest, if that's what happens, what are the prospects for the conflict and for Gaza?
Unfortunately, that would leave the IDF occupying Gaza, facing what is likely to be the kind of insurgency that the Americans faced in Iraq. I mentioned that Netanyahu doesn't want to leave Hamas in power in Gaza. This is where the plot thickens, because the reason why such a pullout would only leave Hamas on the ground is that Israel itself has blocked the only viable alternative to an Israeli occupation or to Hamas, which is a return of the Palestinian Authority, now running the West Bank autonomy zones. Now, Israel has reasonable quibbles with the PA, but it really is the least bad option available that would have any legitimacy.
But what about the argument that, some people made right at the beginning of this, that Israel's war objectives were always unrealistic because they were never going to defeat Hamas in the sense of completely dismantling it and leaving nothing left, if only because the ideas behind Hamas would prevail?
I never agreed with that, because you can defeat a military force, and it's the military bit of it that they really care about. The real issue was that the twin goals of destroying Hamas completely and returning the hostages, they were in conflict, because Hamas has the hostages, and you can rest assured that with their last dying breath, they would kill them. This is why most Israelis who don't want to leave Hamas in power actually do want to end the war, because they notice something is amiss. And the thing that is amiss is that many people in Israel, and polls suggest the majority of people in Israel, kind of think Netanyahu is prolonging the war for his political purposes. And those political purposes are manifold. Partly that he cannot win any discussion about the mind-bending, bone-crushing debacle of October 7th, when everything failed, from intelligence to tactics to the entire strategy vis-a-vis Gaza. Netanyahu's been arguing that an investigation of that day and the political accounting must await the end of the war, so you can sort of see it has no incentive to end the war, other than patriotism and decency if they exist.
It's such a serious thing to say that a prime minister is prolonging a conflict for purely personal political advantage. I mean, I think he would say he's just trying to defeat Hamas.
It's terribly cynical, and it's embarrassing to me to even give credence to such an awful, awful strategy. But I can't rule it out at all. And look, Netanyahu has, maybe other than Putin, the greatest Louis XIV complex on the planet right now. He really thinks that he is the state and he must stay in power. And an end to the war probably bring down his government. Every time it looks like the only deal on the table, which is a pullout in exchange for the hostages, might actually happen, he pours cold water on it. Israel itself offered that deal last May. When it looked like Hamas might actually accept it, Israel backed away and began demanding a permanent control over the Philadelphia corridor, which is the Gaza-Egypt border. And staying in power, by the way, also helps Netanyahu machinate delays in his bribery trial.
You're basically, I think, saying that even if there's a partial deal, in your view, the conflict rumbles on through next year.
There could be various things that happen that change this equation. I mean, Trump could. Netanyahu has attached himself to Trump to such a degree, portrayed Trump as a savior of Israel so preposterously and so consistently, that he would find it difficult to ignore Trump's entreaties the way he has done with Biden. But other things are conceivable. I mean, a war with Iran, whether it involves Israel or the U.S. or both, would create a big diversion and change the narrative and buy him more time. Who knows? Who knows what those ex machina could arrive? Let's say the Trump pressure is such that Netanyahu agrees to do the obvious thing, to indeed let the PA back into Gaza, to give some lip service to a future Palestinian state process, and end the war, get the hostages back, and even probably collect normalization deal with Saudi Arabia. Now, if Trump organizes this very quickly, or if the U.S. organizes it, and they say to Netanyahu, you have to do this, I can see a situation where suddenly he agrees, and the entire planet basically compels the Israeli moderate opposition to join the government in place of the right wing, buying Netanyahu more time until the next election is scheduled in 2026. I have to say, if he's intelligent enough to do just what I said, then that election maybe will no longer be about the October 7th debacle, but rather would be about, a new Middle East.
And that was Dan Perry.